Here are our top 10 must-have sleepers for the coming fantasy season. All right, who is first?
First for me is going to be Chase Brown, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals. Currently on underdog drafts going about pick 110, so outside the top 100 players. We saw last year this guy what kind of explosive ability he has, what kind of upside he has, kind of in that Devon Achane mold of home run hitting type running backs. He didn't play even 30% of the snaps in any game last year and still had some nice fantasy games. And over the last 5 games, he had 12 targets and 11 catches. So he was involved in the passing game even though he barely played. Now going into year 2, remember he was a rookie last year, so now he's going into year 2. Coaching staff should trust him more. Plus, Mixon, a year older, wasn't super efficient last year. I know he was okay, but not super efficient. There's a chance Mixon isn't back. But even if Mixon is back, I still think Chase Brown is the perfect late round running back to draft because he has the kind of weekly upside you want, even if Mixon is healthy and on the field. But if Mixon misses time with an injury, he has the potential to be an RB1 in fantasy. He has that kind of upside, and you're getting him outside the top 100 players. So Chase Brown is a guy I'm going to be targeting late all offseason as often as I can.
I love that pick. Chase Brown, great upside. If only Joe Mixon would just kind of get out of the way. But he's been a workhorse back, and I'll tell you what, the OC for Cincinnati, who's been using Mixon as a workhorse back, is now in Tennessee. And guess what? Their workhorse is gone. Well, we think he will be. Derrick Henry kind of already said his goodbyes. New coaching staff. You know what? It's probably going to be Tyjae Spears, who's the RB1. And why not? He was really good as a rookie, despite only playing 53% of offensive snaps last year, but he still managed to be one of the top 10 running backs in terms of receptions on the season, and he averaged 4.5 yards per carry. When he was in there and got extended run, he actually looked good, despite being part of a not too great conservative offense. But new coach, probably a new system in place that's going to utilize the running back as a receiver a lot. And I doubt they're going to bring in a lot of serious competition for Spears. They have other holes to fix there. So he's going to be the lead back. He's a great runner. He's a great receiver. He's going to be featured. That's what you want for a running back who's not going to be drafted as an RB1. Now, I worry that this whole sleeper status might not last too long because as of right now in Underdog, his ADP is hovering kind of around 70. And so I will say this is a great time to draft him if you do best ball drafts on Underdog. But I'm definitely keeping an eye on him as a breakout performer next year. All right, who else is stepping up that you definitely want in your drafts?
I definitely want to get as much Khalil Shakir as I can. Wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. He was actually better than Stephon Diggs down the stretch, and that's not hard to do. Stephon Diggs is pretty bad. But you look at the Bills' last 3 games, and this does include the playoffs, he scored at least 12 fantasy points in all 3 of them, and he had 16 or more in 2 of those games. Now he's entering year 3 as a wide receiver. He made a big-time leap from year 1 to year 2, the kind of leap you want to see, the kind of progression you want to see. I think he makes an even bigger leap heading into year 3. And you look at this Bills pass catching group. You got Stephon Diggs, who looked very dusty down the stretch last year. Gabe Davis, who is Gabe Davis. And then a tight end, Dalton Kincaid. I mean, it's not hard to see a path for Khalil Shakir being the number 2, maybe number 1 target on this team next year if he really does surpass Stephon Diggs. He still has Josh Allen, still in this Bills offense. I think for a guy that you're getting outside the top 110 picks, he has tremendous weekly upside.
I think there's a lot of upside in a young receiver who was actually better than a lot of people thought last year, Demario Douglas. Now, there's a lot we don't know about the Patriots next year, but here's what we do know. Number 1, Bill Belichick, not around anymore. They have a young rookie head coach in Jared Mayo, who's going to bring some new ideas. We're also not going to have Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi at quarterback. Guarantee that. They'll either get a veteran in the free agent market or they'll draft one really, really early. And number 3, they're probably going to feature Douglas as the number 1 receiver because let's face it, they spent way too much money on Devontae Parker. They've got a lot of other holes to fix as well. And Douglas performed well enough to show that he can be the featured target there. Now, we don't see huge stats at the end of the year because if you remember early in the season in week 2, Demario Douglas had the misfortune of fumbling, and that's all it takes for Bill Belichick to put you in the doghouse. And inexplicably, despite him being their best receiver, he basically limited his playing time. He didn't really get on the field more than half of the snaps until week 7. And then he went on to be the leading receiver for the Patriots, despite having Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi as quarterbacks. Luke Douglas was really good. He wound up on the season with 49 catches on 79 targets. Just imagine what he could have done with a legit passing attack there. He's going to get a lot of targets next year with a better quarterback in a better system, so I'm all over it. All right, who's another player that you're going to be all over in 2024?
Yeah, I keep talking about Rashawn Johnson, but I really do think he has a chance to be a huge breakout running back this year in fantasy. And if I'm wrong, it's okay because you're getting him around pick 125 in your draft. So if you miss, you miss. But there's a good path here for Rashawn Johnson. First of all, despite only playing 37% of the snaps last year, he still led all Bears running backs in targets and receptions. He is a good pass catcher. He already has that part of the game. He's also a good running back, though. Remember, he was stuck behind Bijan Robinson, but he was productive in college, and he was productive last year when given the chance in the NFL. And he has a chance to take over this backfield because unlike the three-headed committee we saw last year, Deontay Foreman's a free agent, Khalil Herbert on the last year of his deal, there's no guarantee Rashawn Johnson doesn't just take over and pull away as the best running back. I think he's the most talented running back. I think he's at least as talented as Khalil Herbert on the ground, but he's a better pass catcher. It's not hard to envision Rashawn Johnson just taking over this backfield outright, kind of similar to what Kyren Williams did to Cam Akers last year. And if he does, you're going to be very happy you got him this late because he's going to have a chance to win fantasy leagues.
Well, one offense I'm going to keep investing in is the Indianapolis Colts, which might sound surprising, but here's something that's surprising. Did you know that the Colts finished as a top 10 offense in terms of points scored? That's even more surprising when you consider the fact that under rookie head coach Shane Steichen, they had a backup quarterback almost the entire season, and it was Gardner Minshew, not somebody spectacular. And Jonathan Taylor, their featured back, he missed several games, only really played in 10, and even some of those games he played, remember he was limited coming back early in the season. Despite all that, I was really impressed with Steichen, the way he managed his team and ran this offense. Just imagine with Anthony Richardson back what Josh Downs can do. And so Downs is one of those players that even though he won't be the leading receiver on his team, assuming Michael Pittman is back, of course, I think Downs is going to be a really strong number 2 because Richardson has shown he was very capable, not just running, but as a passer too in the limited time we saw. And Downs showed that he was capable. He took a kind of a downtick middle of the season after an injury, but still wound up with 771 yards. And remember, Gardner Minshew. So I'm impressed with Downs. I think he still has a ton of potential. I think this whole offense has a ton of potential. And I think that he's going to go undervalued next year. All right, who else might be a screaming value in drafts?
Hey, you talk about Josh Downs being undervalued. I feel like Josh Palmer for the Chargers is always undervalued. Currently going pick 159 on underdog drafts, but we've seen 2 years in a row, this guy has been fantasy relevant. And now, going into 2024, his path to fantasy relevance seems even greater than it's ever been. First of all, wide receiver Mike Williams, who is a free agent, also tore his ACL, coming off ACL surgery. We don't even know if he'll be back. Keenan Allen, also a free agent. We don't know if he'll be back. And the rookie they drafted last year in the first round, Quentin Johnston, had the kind of rookie season that typically precludes a wide receiver being a bust. I'm not ready to put the bust label on him yet, but not a lot of wide receivers do what he does year one, especially given the amount of playing time he got, and then bounce back to be great wide receivers at some point in their career. So Joshua Palmer probably going to be needed again in this offense next year, and you got to be feeling good about this team and this offense with new head coach Jim Harbaugh. He gets the most out of his players. He wins everywhere he goes. We should see a better Chargers offense. And Joshua Palmer is going to probably be out there scoring fantasy points again. Going to be a guy that's going to be like, it's going to be like week 3. It'll be your waiver wire video and you'll be like, hey, go pick up Joshua Palmer. Well, if you watch this video, you won't have to because you'll already drafted him because he's one of my favorite sleepers in 2024.
All right, it's time to get a little deeper. There's still a lot of offseason to play out, including free agency. So let's talk about some possible scenarios. We know T. Higgins is one of the big name wide receivers that could be somewhere else next year. Guess what? Tyler Boyd is also a free agent, and we know that their OC in Cincinnati is gone. Could we see some changes? Could we see a receiver like Andre Iosivas step up and become relevant next year? Well, we already started to see that at the end of last season. Now, I know injuries had a part in it, but he was the guy who did step up. Over the last 3 weeks of the 2023 season, Iosivas had an 8-target game and a 7-target game and ended the year in the final week with a 2-touchdown game. That means something, and let's also remember, this was coming from Jake Browning. Now imagine him catching passes from Joe Burrow, possibly as the number 2 or 3 receiver in the system. It could happen. Physically, he's got a leg up. He's 6'3", 205. This guy posted a 91st percentile speed score, an 88th percentile burst score. He's got what it takes physically, and he showed that he earned the trust of the coaching staff late in the season. Year 2, could definitely see him take a leap. So this is definitely a deep round flyer, but one that I'm going to take more often than not. All right, we couldn't forget tight end, right? Who's somebody that you're targeting for next year?
Yeah, speaking of a deep round flyer, I'm going to have a ton of Chig Okonkwo this year. He's going to be that tight end where if I miss out on the early elite guys, I'm just going to wait till the last round and grab Chig Okonkwo. I'm guessing in most drafts he's not even going to be drafted, but he should be because you look at him with Will Levis, he was actually pretty good last year. He had 5 or more targets in 5 out of 9 games with Will Levis, and he had 6 or more targets in 4 games, and you just talked about it. Cincinnati's OC, Brian Callahan, now the head coach of the Titans. It's not going to be the same old offense, the ground and pound, boring offense. They're going to throw the ball more. It's going to be a more dynamic offense. And who is he competing here with targets? DeAndre Hopkins, who didn't even look that good last year and is now going to be, 32, 33 years old? I don't know. Way too old for the NFL. And then Treylon Burks, who, sure, I like him, but are we ever going to see Treylon Burks be a target monster type of player? I don't think so. There's a path here for Chig Okonkwo to finish as a top 12, maybe even a top 10 tight end in fantasy, which isn't really that hard to do in today's landscape. So Chig Okonkwo, for me, you're waiting on tight end, you missed out on the elite guys, just punt and grab them with your last pick.
And if Okonkwo is off the board and you're still looking for a tight end, I'm going to look at Brevin Jordan in Houston. Now, Dalton Schultz is a tight end who's been starting in Houston, but that doesn't mean it'll be the case next year. Dalton Schultz, he missed out on a big payday. The Cowboys weren't willing to give him a long-term deal. He settled for a 1-year deal from Houston. He's a free agent again, and there might be, despite the fact he does want to stay in Houston, money talks. There might be a team that's willing to pay him on a long-term deal, and Houston might not want to go there. So even besides that, look, with Schultz playing all last year, Brevin Jordan did have his moments. You might not realize that even though Jordan's been in the NFL for 3 seasons, he's still young. He's only 23 and a half years old as of right now. He's still got some growing to do, some learning to do, and he finally has a new quarterback in CJ Stroud, who I think we all agree is pretty legit. So look, an offseason, possibly serving as the number 1 tight end in this offense. Yeah, there's some upside, some potential here. Jordan has great hands. He's got good speed for the position. He's not a blocking tight end, I will just tell you that. Jordan is a guy that you might find creative ways to get the ball. This is purely a speculative upside pick, and that's exactly what you should be looking for at the end of your draft, especially at a position like tight end where there's just not a lot after the top few guys are gone. So those are our top 10 sleepers for the later rounds. But who are just the top 10 must-have players for 2024? Well, you can find out right here.